are so glad that you are here for the Writer's Bridge tonight. Mubina, Eid Mubarak. How are you?
Thank you. I just landed in India today. Eid Mubarak to you.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Let me make sure to pin Sue so that we have her right up top. Let me make sure to pin me and Charla so that we are also right up top so that I can find us, because otherwise I'm like leafing through a bazillion Zoom screens. So welcome, everybody. We are so glad you are here. Please go ahead and open up that chat window if you don't find it hideously distracting, and let us know by dropping into the chat where you're coming in from and what you're currently writing. Is there anything that you're excited that you're writing? Is there anything that's really challenging right now that you're writing? Let us know in the chat where are you coming in from. What are you currently working on? Hey, Rebecca Morrison, you just published something that went really well. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I published a piece in the Today Show website, on the Today Show website, and that actually, as you know, I told you and Sue, that got agents to contact me, and I signed with Folio for both memoir and my middle grade book. So I have 2 agents at Folio now, and I'm trying to get both those books done.
That is fantastic. And you have answered the question that a lot of us have, which is, I'm writing in 2 different genres. Do I need 2 different agents?
Yeah.
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 You published a bunch of pieces in a row in my class, didn't you,
Rebecca?
Yes,
I took Sue's class. It was amazing. And it was really, the agent that contacted me said she'd been following my pieces and seeing all these pieces being published, and she'd been reading them. And the Today Show piece was the one that got her to say, that's what she said, I need to grab her before somebody else does. But Sue has been amazing because of Sue. Is how I got the middle grade stuff started, actually. And I went to her panel and I met a publisher and the whole thing started. It's amazing.
Where did you start publishing again? You had a couple clips during the class, I remember.
Yes, during the class, I had The Independent, I had Salon that I started in yours. I had The Insider, I had a bunch of them.
Yeah, I remember.
That is so
very fast,
awesome. I love it. If you are just joining us, sorry, I'm kind of stampeding in here. If you are just joining us, please do drop into the chat. Where are you coming in from and what are you currently working on? And if you are watching the recording, we also invite you to drop that into the comments. We would also love to hear where you're coming in from and what are you working on. We know a lot of people come live. We know a lot of people watch the recording, and you are equally welcome no matter which method you choose. And the really, really smart people come live and then also watch the recording to make sure they got the maximum value for their free information.
Just a reminder also, when people are writing questions in the chat, it's fine if you want to give hearts and stuff, but we're going to ask people to reserve the question mark symbol for Alice and I as we're marking questions to make sure that people get answered.
Yeah. So if you have this function on your chat, you're able to hover over a comment in the chat. You can hit that little smiley face and select a response to it. Maybe you want to give it a thumbs up. Maybe you want to give it a heart. Let Charla and I use the question mark because we love how active you all are with questions. And that does mean that they whip past us at the speed of light in the chat. We want to find them. We want to be able to get back to them. All right. So it is 9 o'clock. And as you know, we always try to start on time. So hello, welcome to the Writer's Bridge. Eid Mubarak to those who are celebrating. And I'm just going to take a quick moment and hit the mute all button. So Sue and Charla, you will need to unmute yourselves. If you have just dropped in, feel free to drop into the chat where you're coming in from and what you're currently working on. So our topic tonight is publishing anywhere and publishing anywhere, everywhere. So, hey, Charla, I have a question for you. Charla, when are you going to be in Modern Love? Because people sell books when they get into Modern Love, right? When are you going to be in Modern Love, Charla?
Not sure. When you done with that op-ed for the New York Times, you've helped other people do it. You know, when are you going to do it?
Where is my New York Times op-ed? I can't just help other people get in there. I got to do it or I'm never going to sell a book. You know, so we have all heard this. We've heard it from writing teachers. We've heard it from well-meaning family and friends. place some essays to build your platform. Memoirs sell from hot essays. Just go viral. That's going to sell your book. We've just heard Rebecca say how her agent reached out to her because after taking Sue Shapiro's class, Rebecca published in a whole bunch of places, and it does work. But we all know it's not that easy. Pitching is not just why here, why now, why me. It's also finding emails and reading magazines and figuring out how fast can you write something meaningful and newsworthy.
Or writing something beautiful and literary and waiting 6 months to hear back from the editors. But today you're going to hear from an absolute legend, a freelance writer not only hugely successful herself, but who also teaches her students to publish anywhere and everywhere.
Before we introduce our guest, Charla, what's going on with Craft Talks webinars?
Thanks, Allison. I want to make sure to highlight that on July 5th, which also happens to be my birthday, we're going to have a free event on finding, securing funding for your writing. And last Craft Talks presenter, Shannon Reed, mentioned how often she reads grants that are just so poorly written and cobbled together that it's actually easy to rise to the surface of those application pools. So you just got to figure out how to write them. So Chelsea Beyondalillo is coming. She's going to talk at 2 p.m. About how to do this. And then July 12th, we have Tamara Dean on using facts to fascinate in CNF. And Lorraine Herring is coming July 19th to talk about speculative memoir. All these events and more are listed on Craft Talk's website. Allison, what's coming up for you?
And we will have links to all of them in our follow-up email. So coming up tomorrow, Craft Talks is hosting me. I am going to teach Write Better Right Now. And y'all know I'm really hot on writing technique. Like dancers have teachers who literally shove their feet into the right position. Artists all look at each other's sketches in progress. And we don't really have that process of learning technique in writing. You know, we learn grammar in high school, but then we don't learn how do I take what I know about nouns and clauses and make it into comedy, make it into drama, make it into meaning. So I'll be teaching how to go beyond grammar, how words deliver comedy, drama, and meaning, and how to know what writing rules do you break and why. That is going to be tomorrow. We will drop the registration link in the chat, and it is $25, and everybody who signs up also gets the recording. Charla, who is our legendary guest?
Susan Shapiro is the best-selling author, co-author of several books her family hates, like 5 Men Who Broke My Heart, Lightening Up, Unhooked, and her recent memoir, The Forgiveness Tour. She freelances for the New York Times, Washington Post, WSJ, Elle, Wired, Oprah, New Yorker Magazine, and uses her writing and publishing guides, the Book Bible and Byline Bible, to teach her popular Instant Gratification Takes Too Long writing and publishing classes, which are now online. I'll be sure to pop her socials and her how to find her books in the chat as Allison kicks us off with our first question.
So Sue, welcome. Let's start with your books. Now, I have recommended the Byline Bible to so many people as a way to truly understand how do you pitch and write essays. And now the Book Bible won a 2023 ASJA award, which Byline Bible won in 2019. Go you, win, win, win. The Book Bible is subtitled How to Sell Your Manuscript No Matter What Genre Without Going Broke or Insane. And you boil down the rules of publishing so clearly. How did you learn those quote unquote rules? How did you build success?
I learned the hard way. So I moved from Michigan with the original idea of, I think I'll go to New York and be a writer. And basically I banged my head against the wall for 23 years. And I did a graduate degree in creative writing and worked at magazines and in publishing. And it just was very hard to figure out through taking a lot of classes, a lot of mentors, and a lot of therapy to figure out how to deal with rejection. I finally got very lucky at 43. I had my first memoir, came out, 5 Men Who Broke My Heart. And my shrink said that I was like Icarus flying too close to the stars. So I just wanted to recreate that amazing experience that I had. But the secret in publishing is that if you do well in one genre, if you do a book in one genre or 2 books in one genre and it doesn't sell, you're kind of over. You know, so if you get a big book deal, like I had a book deal for 2 memoirs and they weren't instant bestsellers. So usually it's over, but I didn't want it to be over. So what I found was the secret was that sometimes if you switch genres, they'll start you over again. So you don't really, you know, if my 2 memoirs weren't raging bestsellers. If I switched to novels, then I'm sort of a blank slate, so they could project onto me and pretend that that'll be good. But what happened, it kept happening, so it was like, I tried memoirs, I tried novels, I tried self-help, I tried essay collection, an anthology, I did a kid's book. So I kept switching genres, and for a minute I got nervous, and I thought, well, people are going to think I'm sort of a literary dabbler, who never sticks with one genre. And then all of a sudden I realized I was helping my students publish newspaper magazine pieces that led to books. And all of a sudden I realized at this stage, I am now the co-author of 18 books in 8 different genres. And it's absolutely perfect to help students publish, because I have figured out so many different ways to sell a book and how to manipulate a first person story into different categories. So, so it was hard-won wisdom myself. But what's great about it is I could take all the mistakes I made and everything I had to suffer and sort of boil it down to help students who don't have to wait as long as I did to get published and get big book deals.
I love that. I love how you leveraged a series of failures into success, as well as being able to take from what you learned from that and communicate it to other writers so that they would have a little bit easier. Like, that's one of the things I love about Sue. She always has her hand reaching back down the ladder for the next person.
That's really comforting for multi-genre writers like myself, that there's room to be that person too. You don't have to pigeonhole yourself. And you've spoken about changing some of your books from memoir to self-help, and you've published fiction, obviously, and writing craft guides, even a middle grade novel. How do you know what form a book needs when you're writing it?
So in the book Bible, I kind of go through maybe 20 different top genres of books that, you could sell to a mainstream press. So with me, it was a lot of trial and error. Basically, my method is, so I write a book, or I complete an entire manuscript with fiction, or for nonfiction, sometimes I'll do a book proposal. And then I have a lot of ways that I get criticism and feedback before. You don't want to rush to an agent before you've gotten a lot of serious feedback. So I've taken a lot of writing classes, and I recommend all kinds of great teachers in different genres online. Then I have a really tough writing group. I actually have 2 writing groups a week, where they just kill the material, and there's some editors in there and agents and former authors, and they'll just say, this doesn't make any sense, or this is really boring, or I liked it better when you white privilege, or I liked it better when you were helping us and not just showing off about yourself. So I go through this whole process of trying to figure out, as I say to my students, you got to find your poetry. So where's the poetry here? Where's the most important part? After I then rewrite and revise and put together, finish a manuscript or finish a proposal, I then hire professional ghost editors to give me advice. And so these are either people who are currently working or have worked as book editors at big houses, or literary agents, because they know the market. And you could get the most brilliant editor in the world, but if they don't know the exact genre or the market, they're going to give you advice that's going to lead you to, a small press that doesn't pay and takes 2 years to get back to you. Whereas, so I started working with ghost editors, and they'll just help me kick it into shape. And quite often part of the process is, am I in the right genre? So just for an example, there were a few times, well, there was a book that I thought would be a great memoir, because I fix people up. I fixed up 30 marriages, and I was fixed up with my husband and his runner-up. So I thought, let me try a memoir about it. And I hired a ghost editor who said, this is so boring, you're just showing up. Then I fixed up this person. Then I fixed up that person. Boring, boring, boring. And you sound like a show off, but I'm interested. I'm single. So how did you do it? Should I be fixed up? Should I go to a matchmaker? Should I fix up people myself? So all of a sudden that happened several times, where instead of a memoir, if you make it a self-help, it's much, you'll find a bigger audience. That also happened with I started a memoir called Lies My Mentors Told Me. And a lot of editors said, this will never sell. Why? Because the title is leaden. We don't like the word mentors. And because it's 7 profiles of old people, 4 of them dead, so we don't want this. But the minute that I had an editor told me, well, your audience is really writers. And we changed it to Only as Good as Your Word, Writing Lessons from My Favorite Literary Gurus. And interestingly, 85% of the book was the same, but we put a different prologue, a different ending, and more takeaways. And then it found its audience. So that's something I've done several times. And at one point I had a story that just wasn't dramatic enough. And a ghost editor said, it's so funny. Why don't you make it kookier and crazier? And maybe it could be a comic novel. And that I sold as Speed Drinking, my debut novel. So I actually, in my classes, I help people figure that out. Because just for an example, it is very hard to sell a memoir these days, but I've had several people who are writing a memoir where the main action centered on a character that was 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. And if that's the case, it's so much easier, I think, to sell a YA or an MG book these days than an adult memoir, especially if it's not as dramatic as Educated or Made, or Memorial Drive. So I've helped people figure out, is it an MG or a YA book, and get great deals. And here's a perfect example. My colleague, Amy Klein, had gone through infertility and had a lot of miscarriages, and it took her a really long time to have her daughter. And she was trying to sell a memoir on the subject, which just wasn't selling, and it was a little depressing. But when she changed it into the trying game and she interviewed experts, she used her own first person story, but she interviewed experts. She got a 6-figure deal from Random House because that was it was very clear who the audience was. So by taking her first person story and helping other people, she was able to sell it as a fertility book and a self-help book. So I help a lot of people figure that out. And having been through it myself many times, it's actually quite exciting if you're open for criticism. You have to be open to hear. And luckily a lot of my students, they know me and they know that I'm not subtle, but I'll be really honest.
Mm-hmm.
Just I'll give you an example of something that really helped me. So I tried to sell my first novel for many years, 7 years, and it just rejection. And everyone was telling me it was so funny. It was so good. And, if you have people that'll blow smoke up your ass and tell you how great you are, find someone else who'll tell you the truth. Cause it hurts to keep getting rejected and not knowing why. So I had a very close colleague in Michigan who always told me the truth, a mentor. And I said, read this novel, tell me what's wrong with it. And she said, number one, you have no imagination whatsoever. Why are you writing fiction? She said, number two, this is about two sister-in-laws, which is really boring, write about sex. And she said, number three, you're ambivalent about this person. You write better about people you love. So I went home crying and swearing at her, thinking she was an idiot. And then I read High Fidelity the next day, and I thought about, he goes back to meet his top 5 heartbreaks of all time. And sorry if this is sexist, but when the guy does it, he thinks, oh, she's still hot, I'll still screw her. And then the story's over. And I thought, man, if a woman, when I just met with my ex-boyfriend, and I was like going through thousands of pages of journals and diary entries from the therapy sessions, and I saved the gum wrapper from the first date, and I would ask so many thousands of questions, and that all of a sudden I launched a nonfiction about sex and people I loved, and that was my breakthrough book. So ever since then, it just sort of makes me remember that getting tough criticism from somebody. I mean, she was doing it to be kind, because I had wasted 7 years and I couldn't quite figure out what was wrong, but someone who knew my work understood what was going to be my best bet. And she just sort of boiled it down. And so that's what I like to do for my students, because that changed my life. That was the most exciting thing that ever happened to me.
And Sue, I've discovered too, because I have also worked as a ghost editor, which is basically you're not credited. Like authors are not saying, oh, Sue Shapiro or Allison K. Williams or Charlotte Yates edited my book in the query. Like that's not relevant information for the agent. We are ghosts. We sit in the background. So Sue, I know that one of the things I come up with clients is the same kind of thing from the other side. This book is not working because it actually starts at chapter 15. You need to ditch 1 through 14. You're actually focusing on story A. You need to be focusing on story B. And one of the things we try to do here at the Writer's Bridge is we try to also be honest about what things cost. And Sue, can you give us a range? What should somebody expect to pay for like a quick consultation about why is my book not selling? Why is my book not working? Versus a full-on ghost editorial overhaul of the book?
There's a huge range. And if anybody wants to email me, I absolutely have people that I recommend, profsue123@gmail.com. I tend to only recommend people I've worked with because I know exactly how they work. I would recommend you, Allison. I recommend, if you're going to go to a ghost editor, first of all, don't just Google and find someone off an internet. Find someone like Allison who has a huge track record. You could read testimonials from former clients and students. You could see her book. So if you email me, I often share. I mean, I literally last week recommended editors, ghost editors, who I know well and have worked with, who range from $300 to $6,000 for a manuscript. And so $300 was a former editor I work with at Skyhorse Press, who's terrific. She did a proposal of someone that I recommended, and it was a short proposal, maybe a 30 or 40 page proposal. And she worked at a small press, and I did several books with Skyhorse. They're fantastic. I had a New York Times bestseller. That's where she's coming from. And the person who asked really just, their main goal wasn't a huge advance from Random House. Their main goal was that they had another business and they wanted to, it was a self-help book, and they really wanted to, kick it into shape. On the other hand, there was the woman I recommended for a literary novel was someone who'd been the executive editor at St. Martin's Press for many years. And she's very, very high level. And sometimes she'll even help people get agents and stuff, so there's such a wide range. So when people email me, I don't like 1,000-word emails because I'm busy, but if somebody emails me at night and they just give me 2 or 3 lines, they say, hey, this is, I have a 300-page debut novel called so-and-so. I think it's maybe it's a thriller or sci-fi, or it fits under this category. I can afford $300 or I can afford $600. Is there anybody amazing you could recommend? I absolutely will recommend people I've worked with. So it depends. I mean, I have spent, truthfully, I had one book that it was I sold a YA book. I'm sorry, it was a middle grade book. It was a co-authored memoir to Houghton Mifflin, and it took me a really long time to figure out the voice because I had written an adult memoir with this war survivor, but I just couldn't figure out the voice. I wound up spending, I used 4 different ghost editors for over $4,000, and I thought, this is crazy, but it was so worth it. And then we got a big advance, so it absolutely was worth it. But the problem with it is there's no guarantee, so you have to be in love with your project. What I would do, and I had shrink appointments to figure it out, is I would commit to teaching another class, and that would pay for my ghost editor. And I definitely said to myself, this is a gamble I'm taking on myself, but luckily I don't care about fancy clothes or shoes or vacations or, restaurants or whatever. So I would put all my energy and time into being able to afford a ghost editor. And for me, it totally paid off. I think the first one was, I spent maybe $2,500 on the first ghost editor, which was 20 years ago. So she's a little bit more expensive now, but she was a former Doubleday editor for 20 years. So I think it was like $2,500 for her to edit 200 pages. And then my first advance was 50,000. And then I had foreign rights and film rights and stuff. So it's absolutely been worth it for me to do, but you have to be careful because, you don't want to commit to $6,000 and then you get $1,000 book deal and then you feel ripped off. So you definitely have to be careful. Here's another trick if people can't afford it, and I help them, is sometimes if you're ambivalent, you could pay a ghost editor $100 to do your first, sometimes $100 or $200 to do your first chapter, your first 10 pages, and see the kind of notes they get. And there are people who say, I can't afford it. And then they see the kind of notes and they're like, oh my God, I'm going to afford this.
Right.
Sue, I think one of the things that can help all of us too is as you write your book, before you ever get to the end of the manuscript, now is the time to start reading for other people. Even if you are reading as just a plain old beta reader, just reading as somebody who likes reading, it means you are gently making deposits in the bank of goodwill. And when you are at the stage of, oh, hey, I don't have a ton of money, but I just need somebody to read my first chapter and tell me what's going on, you will have made enough deposits in the bank of goodwill that you can then withdraw some favors if you are a person who needs to exchange favors more than exchanging cash.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And there's an editor I work with named Jennifer Baker, who at a panel, she said to me when we were asking advice about writing and editing, she said, be a good literary citizen. And we talked about that. And that involves follow other authors on Twitter. If you can't afford to buy their books, then read their short pieces. If there's a colleague or a friend or Allison or somebody that you like or someone who's helped you, repost or retweet something that they've written, or thank the editors and the teachers and the agents that are helping you, and amplify their voices. That's a great way to do it. And Allison's right. If you're in any, I'm on a lot of writers groups and online groups. So yeah, being generous, being able to help other people absolutely makes a huge difference. In fact, I would kind of guess at this stage in my career, because truthfully, the way it normally works is if you do a book and it's a great bestseller, you get other books. And out of 18 books, only a few of mine have been bestsellers. So I think it's good karma has really carried me because I help so many other people that I think that it somehow comes back to help me.
I love that. I love that. I am going to pass it off to Charla. Charla, what's our next question? Sue, you are the first guest we've ever had who talks as fast as me, and I am loving it. Charla, what's our next question?
Actually, Sue, if you have any way to turn up your microphone or move closer to your microphone, I have had a few people ask for it.
Sorry, I'm going to move closer and talk louder.
Okay.
Brilliant.
Thank you very much. Also, just to add to your list of goodwill, I think doing book reviews is also a great way of building some goodwill. If you're
absolutely, and author profiles. I did, by the way, thank you for saying that. I did that for 15 years, and it is not hard to do book pieces and book reviews. And I teach people in my pitch class how to do that. And some people have the great first clips. One of my students just had a great first clip ever in LARB, LA Review of Books. and it was from a memoir that another student published that she admired. And so she wound up being able to plug a book that she loved and admired while getting her first clip and getting paid and launching her career.
And also, I bet learning while you're reading for craft, you're learning how to do it well and why it doesn't do well sometimes too. So I'm going to shift a little bit here and talk about some novels and publishing trends. Most of us in this group are creative nonfiction, but we do have some novelists like myself. What do you see in publishing trends that novelists should know or learn?
Well, first off, publishing takes so long that what they say is by the time you figure out a trend, it's probably over, because it's going to take, 2 or 3 years from when they buy it to when they, to when it comes out. So the advice that most editors and agents who Zoom into my classes say is, write for love, write what you love. And I will say it's smart to have some basic business information in mind, so I will say that for a novelist, I will say you want to know, you kind of do need to know what genre are you in, because there really is a huge difference between the way that you would try to publish or even finish writing a literary novel versus something commercial versus a thriller or sci-fi or fantasy or romance. So I think you do need to know what genre you're in. And I think by reading books in your genre, I mean, the minute that I have an idea for a book, I go to the bookstore and I find as many books that I think are similar as I can, and I buy them and I read them and I study them, and that's actually helped me figure out how to do, how to pull it off. So I think that's very true for, there's a lot of different kinds of fiction you could write, short stories, novellas. So I think number one, get a sense of what's out there. And there's some big mistakes that people are making. And it's just, you could sort of, if you pay attention to what's going on in publishing lately. For example, I had a great writer who is a straight guy who was writing a protagonist who was Latino lesbian, kind of problematic at this stage of the game. And yes, you should be able to write everything you want, but you're just going to make it much harder for yourself if you're not paying attention to what's going on in publishing. And you can write any character you want, but as a protagonist, if you're inside somebody's head at this stage, especially with YA and MG, but with most novels, it's easier to publish it and to promote a book if the narrator, if there's a first person narrator or a close third person narrator, if it's closer to who you are. So that's been an issue lately. Multicultural books are very, very hot. Immigration books are very hot. So I would say, you want to do your homework. You want to understand what genre you're in. One of the things that really helps sell books a lot, annoying as it is, are comp titles, comparable titles. So it really helps if you can go to, agents, or even a ghost editor and say, okay, this is a cross between, I think at one point with me, I said something like, a cross between Lori Moore and Jennifer Weiner, or, just to get a sense of what you're trying to do, or, and in a nonfiction proposal, you really want to get 5, 6, 7 books that have come out recently within a few years that are similar to yours. And you never want to do Great Gatsby or Eat, Pray, Love, or, you don't want to pick the biggest book that ever.
Sue, let me jump in, because I know a lot of us agonize about how do I find comps? How do I find the right comps? One of the easiest things to do is walk into a physical bookstore and see what is on the shelf where you will be shelved. And that lets you do a couple of things. Number one, it lets you see what is currently selling. What do booksellers think is worth putting on their shelves? Number two, look in those books, because people thank their agents, and that helps you build your querying list with agents who are already representing books like yours. Slight shift here. So Sue, many of us assume that platform means social media. And not only is that not true, I mean, you've proved it by so much of your platform is publishing in all of these different outlets, but social media is shifting underneath us every day. You publish incredibly widely, everywhere from The Girlfriend to The New Yorker. So if a writer is focusing on building a publishing platform with essays, with articles, what should they start with? What kind of stuff should they be considering as they start writing and pitching?
Well, as I say in Byline Bible, not only does everybody have a different goal, I think you can have a different goal for every piece, but I think you need to get in touch with what your goal is. So when I get students in my online classes, I bring in 15 different editors who are open for new writers, every 5 weeks. And, I ask students, what do you want? So if somebody doesn't have a clip, they might just want to get published. If someone's trying to publish a book, then you might want to aim for, a prestige place like New York Times Modern Love or the New Yorker or Washington. Two students just sold books with Washington Post pieces. So those are amazing. Sometimes the goal is the most amount of money, in which case you would look at, print magazines pay more. Some people want to do the fastest, in which case it's an op-ed where you can write a piece on Tuesday. It could be out on Wednesday, a provocative op-ed. So I think first you have to figure out what your goal is. And then when you're writing a pitch letter, which I teach now, there's really interesting things that are platform that people don't realize it. So for example, my biggest platform out of everything I've done is that I'm a former smoker, drug addict, and recovering alcoholic and food addict. So the thing is that if you're writing first person pieces or opinion pieces, you're better off having a lived experience than, for example, a PhD sometimes, because PhDs are academic and you want to be able to, so for example, I've written tons of provocative, counterintuitive pieces for, just for one example on, I think marijuana should be legalized, but I don't think it's very wonderful to have a pot store in every corner. And it's, it's very addictive in my experience. I write about that constantly and everybody publishes it. I did one op-ed that got picked up in like 18 places. So interestingly, the fact that that's happened in my life and then I actually know something about it has helped me publish a lot. So a lot of my students, I'm nosy. I've been in therapy a long time and I'm a journalist, so I'm nosy. So I'll ask them how many kids, they'll talk about kids. How many kids do you have? How old are they? Or they'll mention.
And Sue, I want to butt in here. So, what I'm hearing too is this idea of finding stuff that is counterintuitive is so often your door in. So rather than writing a thing that's really easy for people to affirm, a thing that's really easy for people to go along with, pick the thing you believe that you're kind of afraid to share. Not something that totally violates your privacy, but pick something that is something that other people are probably thinking, but they are also afraid to say it out loud.
My first assignment in Byline Bible is write a humiliation essay on your most humiliating secret. And the reason why is it's provocative, because nobody wants to read, for op-eds and essays, nobody wants to read how cute your grandkids and cats are, or, public schools need money, or war is bad. I mean, so if it's obvious, nobody wants it. So you want to be counterintuitive. You want to be original. I always say to my students, write the piece that only you can write. If someone else can write it, let them, so you just, that's definitely one of the reasons when we go over pitches in class, and when I go over essays, in my essay seminars, that's a really common problem, is somebody has written a really, it's very well written and it's very smart, but it's boring and we've heard it before. So you definitely, and one of the things I talk about in class and in Byline Bible and in Book Bible is titles. You get a good title. I remember I really wanted to break into, I think it was Elle magazine, and I came up with the title when I pitched it. It was I started a secret Facebook friendship with my ex's wife, and the editor said I already knew I was taking that piece.
Okay, so it's just the title. The title.
Yeah, just the title. So sometimes if, but also it was idiosyncratic. I mean, everybody's on Facebook and everybody, looks up exes. So you have to find a way to formulate your story or what you're going through, or your breakup or your pain, in a way that's provocative and interesting. I mean, I remember one of the biggest modern loves was the woman who was dying, who wrote, will you marry my husband?
Right. I remember that one too.
Right.
What do you see is
the editors always say we don't want pieces on somebody dying of cancer because we've had a million of them. But if you find a way to say it that they've never heard before, that's very weird or unusual or provocative, that is what editors want most of the time.
Right. What do you think are the biggest mistakes you see writers making as they try to finish their books and get published, besides being boring or writing what everyone else is writing?
Well, one of the things that I see because I do a Sell Your First Book class, it's this funny paradox, because on one hand, I get everybody so psyched to publish and I bring in great editors and agents, but then people send out their proposals and their manuscripts way, way, way too soon. So I have a lot of students say, I have an undergrad that's like, oh, I just finished my novel. I've been working on it for 4 months. Give me the agent's name. And I'm like, whoa, first off, who's read this? So even if someone has just come off a 2-year MFA program, I want to know, has anybody read the full book? And if not, you got to get somebody to read. You not only need beta readers, you need beta readers who are in your genre, who are giving you criticism, and then you usually have to, rewrite it. And sometimes you need a ghost editor, you need a teacher, so people are rushing too much. And I guess it depends on the genre, because once in a while, if there's a nonfiction book about Russia, or Ukraine, like one of my students published, she has an upcoming book about what Zelensky can teach you. And she's from Russia, and she took an acting class with Zelensky, and she wrote a short piece, and it led to a book. That was something she could write really quickly because the idea was amazing and it really was timely, but if you're writing a novel or short stories or a literary memoir, you're just not going to be able to finish it. It's very, very rare that someone could finish a book in a year. My first novel took 13 years from start to finish. So instead of a book launch, it got a book mitzvah. And I just recently, you think after I wrote a lot, it would go fast. My memoir, Forgiveness Store, it took 10 years. So I would say you want to be realistic. If you're in the biggest hurry and all you want to do is get a book deal, then look at genres that are quick. So if you have, just for an example, if it's a self-help book and you have a great platform, that could maybe be a fast story. Or if it's something playing right off of the news, that could, maybe those books go quicker, or a romance novel, genre fiction. Sometimes those, I know people that write sci-fi or thrillers or romance books that I've seen happen in a year, but a literary novel written in a year, very rare, and if you really pay attention to authors that you like, I was at the National Book Critics Circle, and I remember an author stood up after she won an award and said, I even remember who it is. She stood up in front of everybody when she won the award, and she said, Marilyn Robinson, she said 2 words. She said 20 years. And she got a standing ovation because everybody knew
how long it takes.
Her book took 20 years. Yeah. So I'm not
and
saying
I think, Sue, that's one of the things that I tell authors a lot is the difference between writers who succeed and writers who do not, is that the writers who succeed keep pushing after they feel entitled to be done. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges for us. We have a question from Morgan in the chat about essay publication. What is the policy about sending an essay to multiple outlets? By which she means, can you write your essay that's about training dogs and you send it to Mother's Helper and you send it to parents and what's the deal with that?
No. And if you read Byline Bible, I say very clearly, most editors do not want multiple submissions. And if you multiple submit, they'll blacklist you, because if you send a piece to the New York Times and by the time the New York Times comes back and says, okay, we're interested, and you've already sold it to the Boston Globe, they'll never work with you again. And you've humiliated the editor, because quite often before an editor can say yes, they have to bring it up with other editors and fight for it or discuss it. And once they've done that, if they go back to you and you've already published it elsewhere, they're not going to publish it and they're not going to work with you. So you have to be extremely careful. There are a few editors. Part of the reason why I bring in 15 different editors in my pitch classes is because every single editor is different and has a different policy. And there's no book, there's no place where you could just find it. You just have to learn it by meeting the editors and figuring it out. And then they change and they move around. But one of the things the New York Times Modern Love editor, Dan Jones, has said, he does not mind multiple submissions because they get way too many submissions, and he could take a year. So if you send a piece to Modern Love, they do not mind if you send it elsewhere. But the minute that you sell it, you want to email him and say this is no longer available, so they do not waste time reading it. So that's one of the few editors who I've met who doesn't mind multiple submissions. But just about every other editor I work with says they will be extremely offended if you send a piece to them and you send it elsewhere, and by the time they get back to you and want it, you have a yes.
Let me tag in on this. Let me just tag in on this. I love you, Sue. You and I are going to be like a tag editing team sometime, and we're just going to stand up and like chest bump each other every time we have to change the subject. I want to just clarify for our audience, because I know we have people who write literary as well as people who are pitching essays to commercial and mass media. For literary, they take a long time to respond. It's okay to submit to more than one place. Just keep track, because you have to pull it from the other places when it gets accepted.
Well,
for
Allison,
commercial,
I just want to clarify though that every editor is different, because just for an example, I know people from LitHub and Paris Review, especially online, who don't feel that way. They feel if you send them a piece, if you send it to a lot of other places, and another place says yes, they're offended. So what I would do is, pay attention to. You can really, if you go to the they call it a writer submission a lot of time, pay attention to each one, because a lot of times they will say no multiple submissions, or they'll charge a fee for a contest. And, So pay attention to each editor. One of the things that I do, by the way, is you can absolutely say to an editor, literary or newspaper or magazine, you could say, or literary agent, if I don't hear from you by August 7th, I'll move on. Thank you. So you
And this
give
addresses Nafari's question from the chat about what if your essay pitch is timely. Generally put that in the subject line of the email. And Sue has really great instructions on this in the Byline Bible as well, which really goes through step by step. And I highly, highly recommend that.
And by the way, so
Charlotte,
Eric,
what's your
in
next
that,
question?
in that case, what you do is you would say, if it's very timely, you would say, not only timely in the title and the subject heading, but you would say, hope you'll accept my timely piece. And you'll say, this is so timely. If I don't, I'll check back with you Friday, or if I don't hear from you by Friday, I will move on. That's totally upfront and fair. Don't do it, but don't do it there's people that do it in sort of an angry way. Like they'll say, you didn't get back to me. This is really timely. You're not entitled for them to read your piece. So you want to do it in a kind way. Sometimes I'll say, if I don't hear from you by Friday, I'll move on, but you're really my first choice, or I'll say it in a kind way, but just so you're giving them the information that they need to decide.
And if you're pitching literary magazines, David Raskin mentions in the chat that chillsub.com lists literary magazines with simultaneous or not simultaneous submission guidelines. Commercial media, magazines and newspapers tend to respond a lot faster, or you can write them off a lot faster than a literary outlet. Charla, what's our next question?
Well, it's about time as well, but it's more about, Susan, how do you arrange your time with all these things that you're doing?
Well, I had a great therapist who, it was interesting because when I did addiction therapy to quit smoking, drugs, and drinking, he kind of rearranged my whole life when I was 40. So basically I wake up and I write, and I work on the most important project, which for me has been books. So I wake up and write, and I try to avoid every other thing. I try to shut the world out and just write. And I actually make goals for myself. So I had a mentor who once said a page a day is a book a year. So I keep that in mind. So my goal is at least 250 words a day, and sometimes more. So that's what I do at the very beginning of my day. After I get my pages in, then I go to the next level of work. So maybe like today, I'm going to work on an essay that I'm in my head. I have to finish it for my writing group on Thursday. When I'm done with that, then I'm going to edit a piece that's due. And then at night, what I do is I either teach or do my writing groups, or then I go over my student work. But I do that at night. I do that and interestingly, because it's a different energy, it works better that way. And if I wake up and do work for other people, then I resent it and I don't get my own work done. So,
Right.
so the addiction specialist really helped me. So every day for me to feel happy and also generous enough to help other people, I have to get my own writing in, and I actually have to work out for an hour. Whether it's just walking or swimming or whatever.
Sue, just to put this in perspective, do you have children? Do you have pets? Do you have relatives for whose care you are responsible? Because I know that part of what let's
write that. Yeah. No, and I write that down. I don't have kids. I have a husband and no pets. So I am not responsible to take care of other people. And I've helped a lot of mothers figure out how do you balance caretaking with writing. Marie Poncet, who had 7 kids and many books, said she used to write in 10-minute increments. Which I thought was fascinating. And I've helped a lot of moms figure out, how to balance writing with taking care of people. And also, whether it's getting if there's a partner involved, or, getting some kind of childcare arrangement, or sometimes it's 3 a.m. or it's 6 a.m. Yeah. So in my particular case right now, it's so it's just me. My husband's a writer also, which really, really helps because he's very understanding, and we just sort of have a rule, like if you're on deadline, we know not to talk to each other. So I'm very lucky that way. Although I will say that even without kids and pets, there were many years where I was helping other people, or relatives and friends and colleagues were taking advantage of my energy. So, people would be sending me manuscripts left and right, and I would just be doing them, or I'd be helping other people get published. So it took a long time to learn how to be selfish. And I always say I'm the most selfish person in the world and the most generous at the same time, because if I get what I need, then I can help other people.
Absolutely. And this brings me to something I wanted to ask you too. When I first wrote the promo copy for this episode, I used the word self-promoter to describe Sue Shapiro, because I think of Sue being really public, and I did not realize that self-promoter is seen by a lot of people as an insult. I looked it up in the thesaurus. It's right up there with snake oil salesman and pushy and bumptious. And yet I see Sue as a role model for constantly sharing free advice, constantly sharing her free programs, constantly practicing that very public literary citizenship. And the side effect of all that generosity is that I remember her name and I remember what she delivers. But a lot of us are shy about sharing our work. Yeah, a lot of us
what you
are
want to
shy.
think about though is that there's, I could think of 20 male writers off the top of my head. The only thing they ever post is about their own work constantly. No one has ever called them self-promoting. They're like successful writers. That's what they do. So I personally am on social media mostly for business. So I don't post pictures of my cats or my food. I'm on there for business. In fact, social media sort of coincided with me publishing a book. So I have two businesses. I'm a writer by day and a teacher and a mentor by night. So that's what I use social media for. And interestingly, I would say 9 out of 10 of my posts involve promoting other writers or editors or agents that I work with. Yet I do get, oh, you're self-promoting or you're so aggressive, or, I get these negative terms that truthfully, I think it's sexist because, think of not only successful male writers who nobody ever says that, but you think of even, I hate to say it and I'm not comparing myself in any way, but you think of a Elon Musk or a Bezos or a Trump, and they get so far ahead by being bloated, self-promoting idiots who don't ever help anybody else. But nobody ever says, oh, you're self-promoting. They get all this money. I mean, they win awards, they get huge companies because it's somehow acceptable for a male to promote themselves and to promote their work and to talk about their work in a way that's, I'm proud of my work. So I do point it out to people when they say it. And I think that people don't understand that, I think there's a subconscious bias against successful women. And yet you sort of almost have to balance the, you have to be sort of like a non-threatening mommy figure to be likable, or you have to do charity and help other people. But men, I don't think men have that same stigma. So I do point it out to people. And I know that you didn't mean it negatively, but, I do point it out to people. And I actually help so many of my students, especially women students, promote themselves. Be proud of yourself. If you published a piece, and the way around feeling like you're being too self-promotive is when you publish a piece, thank your editor, thank your agent, thank the classmate that read it, thank your teacher who helped you, so there's a way to be self-promoting that benefits you, but that also is kind and generous and, gives you good karma.
Sorry, go ahead, Charla.
There's a question in the chat wondering if you could give an example of how authors should respond to the question, I guess, asked from maybe when they do submissions, what's your goal and what do you want?
Well, I mean, again, in Byline Bible, I have, there's 20 different things that you want, so do you want to get a clip? Do you want to make a lot of money on your first piece? Do you want a prestigious publication? Do you want to launch a book? Do you want to get more clients for your, I had a student that was a life coach. She wanted to get more clients. Are you an activist? Are you just trying to get the word out? Are you, I've had several doctors who want to get the word out about, for example, how to get, what states to get abortions in, or how to be safe. So, I mean, a lot of LGBTQ students just recently for Pride wrote really important pieces promoting, and advocating for more LGBTQ fairness in laws, so you have to say to yourself, what's my goal for this piece? And you could have a lot of goals. And by the way, you could change your goal for each piece. So just for an example, I'm working on an essay collection right now. So maybe my goal might be to sell an essay to the most prestigious publication that might help me get an editor, a book editor for my piece. But my next piece could be, I'm starting new classes soon. So I'm going to do a self-help or a writing piece, because once I post that, then a lot of people are going to contact me and want to take my class. So you could you could have a different goal for each piece that you write. And I really do list them in Byline Bible, because when I taught, I've taught NYU, the New School in Columbia, undergrads and graduates for many years, and sometimes the student just wanted to get an A in the class, or they needed to get, they needed the credit for the class, which is absolutely fair. So we went around talking about, what do you want to achieve with this piece? So, and like I said, could be 100 things.
Right.
Yeah. Absolutely. So Sue, one more question before we shift gears here. We've had a couple of people say, how do you shift gears? Do you work on more than one piece at the same time? Do you work on paying work for your clients or teaching class at the same time as writing your own pieces? How do you balance those elements?
Yeah, basically I write by day and I teach by night, and I try to keep really careful boundaries, because if I didn't, especially now teaching online, my students would just email me 24/7 every single minute helping them. So I have boundaries. So I'm like, only email me at night, and my classes are at night. And, you know, and I only want you emailing me your pieces at night, and I just do my own writing by day. I mean, it shifts based on my project. So if I'm writing a book, every day I wake up and work on the book. You know, at this point I'm working on a few essays. So I'm working on an essay to sell the book is the first thing I do. And then I work on a few other projects. But again, it's, you know, it does shift. But the most important thing is that I figure it out in advance. And again, highly recommend therapy. If anybody, I was having a lot of trouble, not only getting rid of my addictions, but making enough money and selling books. I was having a lot of trouble. And I found a fantastic therapist who really, really helped me get my goals straight and figure out how to publish books. And the way I do it is just, you know, I write down in advance, what's my goal? Page a day is a book a year. I have 2 writing groups. So I have to, that is my deadline for the week. That's the first thing I think of, is I have to finish these pages for my writing group on Thursday and Sunday. And then sometimes, you know, if an editor sends me back stuff, then okay, my second thing to do is I have to go back and go over what the editor wants. Sometimes I'm finishing a co-authored proposal, you know, but so I write a list. But the most important thing is the project that I care the most about, that's the closest to my heart, that I want to sell, I wake up and I do that. And by the way, you know, there's been medical issues, there's been family issues. So I know, I'm conscious that it's not easy, but I really fight to, whether it's waking up early or putting people off. I mean, here's just an example, but if a family member wants me to come to the doctor with them, what I say is, then make the doctor appointment at 3:00 when I'm available. And if you make the doctor appointment at 8 a.m. and then you say to me, okay, I need you to come, it's like, unless it's an emergency, I work, you know. And as a freelance writer, people tend to not think that your work is important, or they tend to put other things, you know, in front of it. And so I'm really rigid. I have friends that come in from out of town. Oh, let's do breakfast. I don't do breakfast. I don't do lunch. You know, unless
you've done a really good job putting barricades around your time.
Unless it's my editor who just who just gave me a big book deal. And even then I say, let's do dinner, because I'm in a better mood at dinner, you know? Yeah. So I try to really keep boundaries. One of the pieces that I have in the anthology that I'm, the essay collection that I'm working on, which is tentatively titled, Instant Gratification Takes Too Long, essays on sex, love, and addiction. But one of the pieces is called Quitting Guilt. And it starts out, I spent the last 2 years saying no. And those are the 2 years that I got everything I wanted. So
yeah,
I won't say that I had people pleasing and I had to get rid of guilt. And, and it was a struggle, and it's still a struggle sometimes with loved ones. And I'm sure, I know for a fact that my students who have kids, or who are caretakers for relatives, or who have pets, it's a huge struggle. But there's a lot of ways that one can prioritize yourself or your writing, even if it's just 2 days a week, or this is when I'm going to get, a pet sitter. This is when I'm going to get care. This is when my spouse have to step in. So there's ways to do it, but really, there's a line that I like, which is, successful people do what other people won't to get ahead, you know? So there's a lot of things I say no to. And on one hand, I'm sorry, I don't win a popularity contest. People get mad at me. I don't fly to places for people's weddings and family bar mitzvahs and stuff as much as I probably should have. But it's really hard to publish books, and that's my goal. And I'm so much happier in life when I get what I want, and I'm more generous. So I had a lot of therapy to sort of help me figure out.
Yeah. And I want to mention too, for those of us who are parents, remember, modeling dedication to something you care about being good at is also excellent parenting. So keep that in mind as well. We are going to come on back in just a couple of minutes. We're just going to give you guys some breakout rooms. Remember, they are always optional. You do not have to go into a breakout room. But if you do, tell people, if you were going to pitch an essay, what's the essay you would pitch today? And when we come back from breakout rooms, we're going to talk about 3 things you can do today to get closer to publishing. Remember, you do not have to go into a breakout room, but we have seen a lot of great connections happen and even a couple of publishing deals spring from these meetings. You will be in there for about 5 minutes and then we'll bring you on back. Enjoy meeting each other. Yay. And I think breakout rooms are happening and people are filtering into them. Fantastic. And those of you who are sticking around, please feel free to just stick around. That is also just fine. Plus, if you joined less than about 15 minutes ago, I did not have a chance to stick you in a breakout room. And so you're going to end up staying here with us. Well,
Oh no, is Allison?
Hi, Chloe. Hi, Abby. I see people I know.
Hi,
Sue, I'm sending you an email tonight to bring you up to date on some successes that Allison and I have had. Allison's my editor.
Oh, yeah, and you did
so-
the girlfriend, right? Or was it Ethel? Was it Ethel?
It was Ethel. Then it was
Yeah,
New
they
York
heard it,
Times. New York Times with Mia.
Darla co-host me. I zapped out for a minute. Sorry,
And
go
then
ahead, Paul.
I've got one coming up that Noah Mickelson helped with,
Oh, fantastic.
not in his publication, but in somebody else's. So I'll send you an email
By the
tonight.
way, that was Chloe's was a really good story because Chloe, if you don't mind me, if I remembered correctly,
Sure.
Chloe did not necessarily want to write provocative, I just did a phone sex ring, in my basement when my kids weren't around. She wasn't writing that kind of stuff. She was writing more nostalgic, sweet pieces. And so what was great was that she was willing to pay attention to which editors were going to be interested in that,
Right.
and wound up getting into Ethel. And the girlfriend and Ethel like nostalgic sweet pieces, and they pay what, like $700 or something,
Yes.
right?
And they
Yeah.
paid me before the piece came out, and
Right,
they
and
want
they paid
more,
for the
but I'm
piece.
trying to get
Right.
diverse
Right.
publications.
So I thought that was, that's a really, that's very smart to understand what you want to do, what your limitations are, who's your
Right.
audience. Yeah, so that's fantastic. I remember I was really happy you did that, because there are editors, as we talked about, who love that kind of stuff. It's just that most, some of the editors that were coming to class wanted harder hitting, more provocative, and you
Right,
can't put
sure.
yourself into something you're not. So I thought that was fantastic. In fact, it was the piece about the charm bracelet, right?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah, so that was
Yeah.
great. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
So-
Thank you. And I
so, yeah,
always
by the way,
offer,
if you would have tried one of the other editors, you probably would have only gotten like $200 or $300 anyway. So you really found the perfect person to
Right,
relate
right.
to, your perfect
and
audience.
I always offer to do edits with them, that I'm happy to do edits. And I learned, in your class that it might have been one of the, like the newspaper editor type people who said, don't refuse to take edits from an editor that you're working with, because I guess some people have sort of a pride of ownership or something. I don't know, but
Yeah,
I'm
Abby, you
happy
just
to.
had a big
Also
clip too. Abby, didn't I see one of your clips?
My most recent one was with
Yeah.
HuffPost. It was my first piece with them, and it became an Apple trending story, which
Yes.
you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
it was a big
Congratulations.
deal.
I saw that. That was fantastic. So
Thanks.
did you work with Noah?
I worked with Noah, and I had pitched him a few times in the past and gotten nice rejections, and he actually helped me place another piece somewhere else.
Yes.
But with this one, he got back to me same day. He had some questions about my piece, which I answered immediately because I know my topic well. And he
Mhm.
also wanted, kind of a harder hitting ending. And I said, I've got it. I know exactly what to do. I worked on it for the next few hours, sent it right back to him. He said, love it. You're a dream. This is going to run on this date. And also, I remembered that it happened. My piece has to do with cystic fibrosis, which is a central theme of my memoir in progress. And I remembered, oh yeah, May is Cystic Fibrosis Awareness Month. So I let him know that, which I think was also helpful in getting it placed within the next few weeks.
Fantastic. Where did he help you do another piece for?
So I had written a piece about how watching The Office with my daughter helped heal our relationship when she came back from college.
yeah.
And
What
he
did you
liked
say?
the piece, but he said it's not right for us, but I really like this and I have an idea. Can I reach out to an editor on your behalf? And I'm like, yeah, thank you. And
So-
yeah, so he reached out to the editor-in-chief at Scary Mommy, and they loved
Oh,
it, and they
good.
took it, and they didn't change a word. So that was
That's,
great.
yeah,
editing Byline.
what's really cool is that he meets a lot of these editors in my classes, because I think that was Bustle. So we had I think it's owned by Bustle, right? Scary Mommy.
Yes,
It is, but
yes,
I
it
think
is.
Yeah.
I
So what
think-
happens, which is so cool, is that
Yeah.
I had Amanda Chan and a couple other people who
Well, their editor-in-chief also worked at HuffPost, so my guess
That's
is
how
that
he
she
knew
and
her.
Noah
So
go way
connected.
back.
I love
She
when
was
they
a
do
former
that a lot.
colleague.
It's very, by the way,
Yeah.
it's very rare that an editor will do that. So that's so great that he does it.
He's
That's so
very
nice.
kind. Yeah.
Yeah,
He
And
is
we
very
interact
kind.
on Twitter, and that helps too.
Yeah,
You know,
that's
he kind of knows who I am now. So
Yeah, that's
Great to
great.
be a dream, an editor's dream. That sounds like because you're on top of things, it really worked out for you in the long run that way.
I try to submit very clean copy, and but that was really
Yeah.
nice to hear. Thank you.
Cool.
He wrote to
Congratulations.
me, he said, I really want to help good writers get placed, even if it's not with me. And I just thought that was so generous and kind. So
I love that generosity. I love
Mhm.
that generosity. And I think that's so true, because so many of us are in this business because we genuinely enjoy it and we want to see people succeed.
yes.
Linda asks a question in the chat that's kind of relevant to that. Is it hard to get an agent once you've had an agent and you leave them? Sue, I've had more than one agent. Have you had more than one agent?
Yes, I've had 3 agents. It's funny, I had one agent sold my first 5 nonfiction books. Then I had a second agent that where I did fiction. And then I switched recently to an agent that specialized in kids books when I wanted to do the kid book, and stayed with her. So I've had different agents. I think you have to handle it in a classy way. So for example, if you've had an agent and it didn't work out, I think number one, you have to make sure that you end it on a really nice note. So you write the agent and you say, thank you so much for all your help. I really appreciate your brilliant edits, whatever. Maybe it's better that we go our separate ways now, but I'll always, feel gratitude for. So you make sure that it's in writing that you left, because if you just start querying other agents, they all know each other. So if you start querying other agents and they, and they realize you're double time, you're double dealing, they're going to not like you. So make sure that it's over with the one agent. And then I would say it's kind of like a first date. You don't have to say on a first date, I've been divorced 3 times. You just sort of want to meet a new agent and see if they like your project. Once you meet with them and they're very interested and they ask, tell them the truth, but I don't lead with negative information. So I don't think you have to, a lot of people start their letter, it didn't work out with my last agent, so I'm pitching you. That's not a good way to start. You want to start with, I love your agency. I love your book. It would be such an honor if you consider, pitch your project really well, go back and forth with them. And right before they're about to sign with you, or if they ask, then be honest, and never say anything bad about your old agent. It's like, to be a rule, with an ex, is that if you go on a date and you hear a guy trash his ex, that's how he's going to be talking about you one day. And you just know that. So don't trash even if it didn't work out with the agent, don't trash your agent. Just say they tried, or, wasn't quite a great match.
So changing agents can indeed happen. I hope you guys had a chance to meet each other in some breakout rooms. We are coming close to our closing. We do always try to end on time. We're probably going to run about 3 minutes over today. One of the things that's happening in the chat that's really cool is people who would like to be in a writing group are dropping their email in the chat. Remember, we will share that chat with you as part of our follow-up email. So if you're interested in meeting other writers, there's a couple of writers in the chat who are taking it upon themselves to collate those emails and get something started. Charla, we also have a Discord group that you can join through Craft Talks as well. It's free. It's an open community. We're happy to have people come in and talk about writing, and we will provide a link to that as well when we send out the follow-up, the replay. Before we give our 3 top tips for what you can do for your writing today, Sue, what is your next event?
Well, I'm going to be in LA doing in person, which is exciting. July 11th, I just have a big panel with all my editors and agent friends out there. And my next pitch class is my next online pitch class starts on Tuesday, July 25th. And that's the 5-week class where I bring in 15 different editors who are open for new writers. And the goal of the class is to write a pitch and get a yes and sell the piece by the end of 5 weeks.
Absolutely. And it is a great class. I have heard so many positive things from so many people who have taken that class. I have seen them get published in so many places. Our next Craft Talks webinar is tomorrow. I will be teaching Write Better Right Now. Please do feel free to forward this replay to a writer friend. And if you have received this replay from a fabulous writer friend, check the show notes to be able to join the Writer's Bridge. It's free. You're always welcome. No need to register or RSVP. Just turn up and join us for the awesomeness. We do take July off, and we will see you back in August. What are our 3 things that you can do today? Sue, what's your top tip that somebody can do today to increase their writing career?
I would have a bunch of them. I would say read what you want to be writing, really pay attention. Being timely is really good. Find a great critic. Don't just send out stuff into the blue. Find whether it's a class, whether it's, it's through here. You need a mentor. You need tough criticism, I would say, and be open to criticism. And then my favorite line for writing is just no never means no. It means rewrite it, make it better, and find a nicer editor or agent. So don't take no for an answer. Because I once sold a piece on the 14th try to the New York Times Magazine, and it led to a Random House book. Think of it, 14 tries, so 13 rejections, but
never give up. Charla, what's your top tip for today? What should we do to improve our writing careers today?
I'm just going to highlight the things that I got out of today's session because there are so many great things. We had someone who wrote in the chat, I don't do breakfast, lunch, or coffee, which I think is a great motto. Maybe a tombstone, I don't know. And write for love. I love how you talked about that. First, what draws you to the page? It's a love, and that's what the reader's going to feel when they read it. If you don't love what you're writing, if you're stressing about where it's going to go, who's going to like it, it's just going to be a struggle to read as well. So write what you love and write for
and
love.
I want to tag on to what Sue offered as well, which is write something that is counterintuitive, write something that might be humiliating, write something that you are afraid to speak out loud because someone else is also afraid to speak that thing and they need you to speak it for them.
And also
thank you all so much for being here today at the Writer's Bridge. We are so glad to have you. Please feel free to unmute yourselves for a joyful goodbye. And thank you, Sue Shapiro, for joining us. You have been amazing.
Thank
you.
Everybody, great to meet you. Great session.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Obrigada. Somebody's in Portugal.
Brazil. Obrigado.
Brazil.
Obrigado. Obrigado.
Obrigada. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Sue, thank you so much for your time.
Thank
We
you.
really
It was really
appreciate it.
fun.
You had so
Thank
much
you. What a great
incredible
crowd.
information to
Wow.
share. And
Yeah,
we'll
email
link to
me.
your
Tell everybody they can email me if they have questions. I put my email in the chat. Now that I quit all my
Awesome.
other addictions, I'm addicted to email. So I promise.
dynamite. We will also put your email in the follow-up email, and we will also put your next class link in there. It's such an incredibly valuable class. I hope a lot of people sign up for it.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun.
Yay. Thanks, Sue.
See you guys later.